about 25, 30 years ago, if I, even in my wildest of dreams, if somebody asked me, will I be traveling the world and launching my book, that wasn't in my wildest dreams. And this is already intimidating. It just fits nicely to the title of the book, because I was so intimidated for many reasons. And just for the today's purpose to give you a summary of the book, I'll pick 3 and then elaborate why I was intimidated, and then talk about what are the things that in fact in the end worked out for me. So first, I was intimidated by language. When I went to NUS in Singapore in 2001, hardly spoke any English, at most 5 words here and there. So I took a chance, went to NUS, and then they gave the admission or rather scholarship application. And in that application, there was this thing, which is an essay of your choice, which makes it even difficult. So it's not a topic. You choose a topic, you write whatever you want. That is your one of the requirements for your scholarship application. So I saw some of my friends, they were writing pages of very advanced topics. And I thought about it, and I badly wanted this scholarship. So I stitched 4 paragraphs together very effortfully. That was the maximum I could do at that point. And I took a chance and submitted this thing that was very basic essay about my mother and how hard she worked to give me some cash to come to Singapore. And it was my responsibility to make her proud. That's all I wrote. I was the only Sri Lankan in that batch who got the NUS undergraduate scholarship. So they took a chance on me. Okay, I got the money, now you have to do the work. I go to lectures, and back then we didn't have all these iPods or smartphones just like this. I had this little cassette, the mini cassette. I would go to the lecture, just sit in the front row. Even though I was intimidated, just sit in the front row, because that's where you can capture the voice most accurately. Go back to my room and then listen to these cassettes. And since I knew this is going to happen, I had these glossaries. I would annotate the lecture notes with Sinhalese, and 1 hour lecture, 2 hours later, you have something that's a bit of comprehensible. And then that's how I studied. Fast forward, 2016, I was selected as a fellow of INK in India, where I was supposed to give a talk to a few thousand people. And that was the moment I realized maybe I have gone past the language barrier when I gave this talk and when I got the standing ovation. The second intimidation was money. I come from a lower middle class family, and back then the money was at premium. When we went to school, I went to Royal College, my mother would give me 2 rupees. So you have 2 choices. You can use 2 rupees to eat peanuts, or you save 5 days. On Friday you can drink a bottle of milk. When I came to Singapore, my mother gave her CPF savings, and this is the day I started university, 1st of August 2001. This is all I had, 1,200. That's all. And then I had an aunt who worked in UAE, in Dubai. She sent me a letter about 4 weeks later with another 235.85. So that adds up to about 1,003. Then the NUS scholarship at that time was for an entire year, 3,500 for the entire year, that you have to cover your accommodation, food, everything. So the money had to be managed in a very careful way. I kept record of every single thing. In Singapore, we have this very signature breakfast called kaya toast, that 2 eggs, the kaya butter, that was your breakfast. And Maggie pack back then 110, so that can survive 5 nights. Everything was managed carefully, because there was limited resources. But what I learned from that is the discipline of managing finances. And the moment I finished my bachelor's degree and started my PhD, in NUS, PhD students get paid 2,000 a month. So suddenly from 3,500 a year, I became suddenly very rich. Suddenly you have 2,000 a month. So I was like, wow, I can do a lot of things now, a lot of extras. I started supporting kids in Sri Lanka, university students, those who needed support. And I don't even have their contacts, but some of them find the contact and send notes like this, which was quite satisfying, partly because they were the right people to support, and more than that, even while receiving support, they are already thinking about at some point they should also support others. Eventually, I realized, I had overcome when I get notes like this, that not only now I am able to survive on my own, I am able to help others to sort of reach their dreams. The third intimidation, probably the biggest one, was the technology. Even though I did electrical and computer engineering, at the time in NUS I was clueless. I had a subject that I failed the practical exam, which is the C programming. I wrote the algorithm on paper, but typing takes time. The computer shut down and I failed. Okay, that's a programming class, so I can deal with that. When I was staying in the hostel room, there was this sound, and then I was like, who's knocking? I thought someone surely playing a prank, and later I realized this was the Yahoo Messenger sign-in sound at the time, and I thought, this is not going to happen. I don't even know this little thing. I called my mother. I said I can still go to University of Moratuwa because I was lucky enough to be fifth in the island for advanced level. So I said, I'm coming home. I can go to Moratuwa, which is close to my place in Piliyandala. I can eat your food. So I planned everything. She said, yeah, you can come, but I had burnt your application. So no choice. I had to stay and figure out how to deal with the technology. And I realized, after all, what I did with this thing, the knocking sound, wasn't insane. Someone with some sense, when you hear a knocking sound, what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to look at who's by the door. You're not supposed to look at the screen. So I thought maybe the technology was wrong. And I realized, had I given up, the consequences would have been catastrophic. So the technology can do more harm than good if you don't design them properly. That became my mantra, and to conquer this, I needed to learn the base. So how do we think about, instead of technology becoming an intimidation and barrier, how do you use it to help people to become best version of themselves? One of the work I did almost 15 years ago at MIT was, if I were to give this mic to somebody, I just take the mic and pass, right? Because I can hold the mic. But if I have to give something that's not tangible, how do I do this? Email to somebody or do some weird thing, which is not the same way that you would use for a physical thing. So this project, 2011, here you see a phone number. I just take it as if it is tangible and drop it to my phone. The number gets copied over. Of course, the data goes through cloud, but the point is you interact in a very seamless way, very natural way, similar to how you would deal with a physical thing. So that's an example of turning technology to do things the way we naturally do, rather than us having to learn new ways. This is another example. This is a success of my own PhD, where I built something to help people with hearing impairments to appreciate music, listen to music, enjoy music. And my PhD student took one step forward and he said, I want to help people play music. So if you are hearing, you play, you hear, you make adjustments. If you are deaf, you play and the feedback loop is broken. So what he did was he built this wearable thing which lights up and vibrates. So I now, as a deaf kid, I play, I feel, I see, I can make adjustments. And this boy, 14 years old, Ishan, after a few hours of training, he's doing things like this. And my own version, which is the chair that allows you to sit and listen to music, that has been installed in a residential deaf school in Sri Lanka since 2008. Of course, I got my research papers for my PhD, but since then, I had maintained. Now it has been there even as we speak, used on daily basis. About hundreds of kids, this has become part of their lives, and you can see kids who were 6, 8 at that time, now they are in their high 20s, similarly developed appreciation for music, and they had their own preferences for music, enabled by using the technology in the right way. This is one of my latest work, which is those who know all the smart glasses. This is similar to a smart glass, but it's not a glass, it's a headphone, which has a camera, speaker, and microphone, so you can just ask questions like what's in front of me, tell me, what's the value of this currency, things like that. Obvious use case is blind people, support blind people. This is about 4 years ago. This was the status of the tech.
Okay. Baked beans, am I right?
Yeah, correct.
Fair pies, baked beans.
Try this.
Okay. Chocolate chips. Pancake mix.
We realize, although this looks nice, to make a real impact, you need to go beyond this kind of simple use cases. And now, as we speak, we worked out a specific scenario. How do you allow a blind person to go to a park, museum, gallery, enjoy the things? And it's actually not just for blind people. I think in some sense we all are disabled. If you go to a gallery or museum that you don't know the stuff, unless somebody tells you, you don't know. So you are blind to the information, just like having an expert guide with them. I don't want to spend too much time, but I was started with somebody who barely knew what Yahoo Messenger knocking sounds like. But 20 years down the road, I became a quite successful researcher. I would say cracked the code of how do you now design technology to not make people feel intimidated. People often ask, what is the method, or what's the secret sauce behind all these things? I often say there's no recipe to success. I mean, each of you, I think many of you are very successful because you have your own Mets code. So for me, there were a few things that worked. The first thing that worked for me is, even when there was nothing, I thought big. I thought of big things, and I didn't wait. I started working on them. At the time of finishing A level, going to a foreign university, becoming a professor was a far-fetched idea. I didn't even know how to get there, but I just started walking that direction, hoping that I'll figure out. And the cost of inaction is far greater than trying something and failing and learning from your failing. So that was the first thing that worked for me. Thought big, started small, and I didn't overanalyze things. I didn't try to get the perfect mechanism. I didn't go into this analysis paralysis situation. I just went in the right direction, took one step, and figured out along the way. Something that one of my mentors told me at MIT, he said, always have the vision. Vision is very important. And he gives this very oversimplified example. The person who built the first, the Walkman, remember there was a time you had this big box with a wire, and then you put a cassette tape and it plays music. That was the Walkman. If the person who built the Walkman said, hey, I built this box, it has a cassette tape, you can record music, you can play, you can listen to music, he would not last many years, because the moment the CD man comes, the iPod comes, this is obsolete. Instead, he said, think of the vision. You could present this way as, okay, you could say, my vision is I want people to be able to listen to music on the go. I just happen to realize that vision through this big box, because this is what's available now. Then down the road, when the iPod comes, or now the cloud stuff comes, your vision stays alive. It's just how you operationalize the vision changes. Similarly, we set up the augmented human lab as a way of, how do you design technologies to enable people. Before LLM and AI, we were using our own ad hoc methods. When they go, something else comes, we will use them. So technology is a means to achieve the vision. Second thing, I took risks, and the greatest example is the NUS admission. When you have your Moratoa admission with the Mahapula scholarship, leaving that aside, going to Singapore when you didn't have money, when you couldn't speak English, was a big risk. But it wasn't an insane risk, it was calculated risk. If I didn't get the scholarship, I knew they had this loan scheme that would pay for your tuition, your accommodation, all of that. You just need to pay it back. So I had a backup plan, I had the glossaries, all of that. So I took a risk, but it was a bit calculated. And the greatest risk, again, is not taking any risk. So that was the second thing. The third thing is hard work. You saw the lecture notes, how hard it was to record all this. It was very tiring. But there's nothing, as Samita said, there's nothing achieved without, you all know, putting effort. But for me, what really worked is, I worked hard on the right stuff. My simple formula was I would do this sort of logical flow. It always about what is the output. I want A for this thing, or I want to get the scholarship. Then you boil it down to get that, what are the stuff you need to do. Then you optimize your time. There's eventual outcomes you can't control, but it's always you have finite time and energy. So I worked very hard, but on the right stuff. This is also something that really worked for me, which is following my gut. Some of you may have read, there's a very famous book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow that talks about we have two systems in our decision making. There's the system one, which is intuitive. We meet someone, we are like, oh, I really like this person. I just wanted to be friends with this person. That's the first impression. The second part is, you'll work out your pros and cons, all the analytical stuff. That's a system two. We all do system one, system two thinking. They both are very useful for various reasons. In my case, a lot of my things were largely influenced by the gut feel. Then, of course, you go to all the analysis and logical thinking. And the gut feel also allows me to start now. Otherwise, you can be just thinking and analyzing forever, not doing any stuff. The gut feel really works out the starting now part. Gratitude. I'm here because of the kindness shown by so many people. I'm just a product of some of their kindness. And I think when you achieve stuff, that's where the responsibility begins in terms of giving back. And not because those who supported you wanted you to give back or you have obligation to do so, because you know the kindness, what it means to you. Inspiring others. There were times that people shared their stories when we were not knowing what to do, and some of these doesn't need to be out of this world stories. They could be just simple sharing of the actual things that has happened. And that's exactly why I wrote the book, to share the stories the way they are, so that it could be just this unpolished stories will probably help someone to realize that, okay, the things that I'm facing, the things that seems to be challenging, after all, they may not be a big challenge. These are just moments of life. And another thing that worked for me is I just stayed the way I am. Even though now I am out of Sri Lanka for 26 years, I never try to become somebody who I am not. I get lost in the crowd. In a crowd, people won't even recognize me as anybody special, to the point that when my father passed away, the doctors would come do the ward rounds, they'll talk to each other in English and give me a one sentence Sinhala summary so that this guy understand. Or when we go for trips, when we stop at places for tea and stuff, the shop guy thinks this driver stopped at this place, okay, offer me a free tea. I still enjoy that part. And really what it means is, for me, is I don't have to overthink what to wear to work and whether I look nice, this and that. I just keep things very simple. Being authentic, what really meant to me was being simple. And finally, I think this was the biggest factor. I think everything I did, there was a fun factor. Even when we were struggling with English and money and all of that, because the fun is the part that allows you to keep the energy going. And I seriously think fun doesn't get in the way of achieving stuff. And I've realized that if something is not fun for me, I'm not doing that, because life is too short to be doing boring stuff. And whether you are, doing your PhD, running your business, playing a sport, whatever it is, we can't guarantee results. So you should also optimize for fun and enjoyment. After all, if you really think about it, we don't remember all the milestones, but we do remember all the good times we have had over the years. So in a quick summary, it's really having that vision. Whatever I did had a vision, but I didn't stuck on the vision. I started stuff and did them almost immediately, and I got stuff done because I followed my gut and I put my energy in the right place, prepared and practiced, so that outcome is maximized because you worked on the right stuff. And I took the risks, but in a very calculated way. And when I started achieving stuff, I started paying forward and passing the message, writing these books and giving these talks, so that somebody will get something out of this. And as I said, finally, I just enjoy being myself. I never change the way I was even many years ago. And whatever I do, even including this talk, is a lot of fun. It's fun to come here, fun to meet people, and having a good time. Thank you so much. I hope this was of value.